Ubi est aquila. In Germania, they can keep it. They can have it. No, I don't care. I'm not going back to that forest. I'm not. Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we're talking about Barbarians, the new Netflix show that has been going on like crazy. Everybody's watching it. Is it good? Is it historically accurate? Well, if you like Romans, knights, samurai, weapons and armor, please become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. Okay, so I'd like to begin this video by saying that I really enjoyed the TV series. I watched all 6 episodes. Very well made, I've got to say, compared to all the rest of historically based drama on Netflix, and to be honest, even compared to many famous Hollywood studio production movies, this is the best. Now, does that mean that the show is perfect? No. And as you know, on this video, I'm going to sort of nitpick and see what things actually are following the historical accounts that we have and what are not, and what things could have been done better. To start off, I'd like to speak about weapons and armor. Clearly, Barbarians has been done really well, and weapons and armor is where the show shines. The Romans are portrayed very well, and one thing that I really appreciated is the fact that the Romans are not homogeneous. What I mean by that is that if you look at the army in all the scenes that we see many legionaries together, you will notice that there will be a multitude of sets of armor shown. We will see Romans in lorica segmentata, or to use a more probable historical term, lorica laminata, which is the one I'm wearing here. Mine is a corbridge type B. What I noticed there was either corbridge type A or possibly calcrise type, which, I mean, it makes sense. We also see Romans wearing lorica hamata, which is basically mail made of iron, but we also see many Romans wearing the so-called lorica squamata, or in other words, scale armor, and it's generally speaking made of either brass, so copper alloy, and sometimes even with alternating scales made of iron and brass, or possibly just tinned brass and brass. Last but not least, the officers tend to wear lorica musculata, so the sort of anatomically shaped cuirass, sort of inspired by original Greek examples, but definitely part of the equipment of the Roman army. Now, this is already a very good start, the fact that we don't see the typical trope of Roman soldiers. You just create one Roman soldier, you do CTRL C and then CTRL and you create the entirety of the army. The Roman army, yes, they did have sort of uniforms. Yes, they did, like every soldier had armor, particularly at this time. Remember that the TV series is set in 9 AD, so we're talking about the beginning of the empire. We're already talking about post-Marian reforms, and therefore being a soldier is now a duty to Rome. It's a profession. So yes, everyone should have armor, but that doesn't mean that everyone has to look the exact same. That's what we see in video games. It's a trope. So what we see here, absolutely fine. That's probably how it would have looked. And in terms of, again, the material used, the fact that some wear copper alloy and some wear iron, it's absolutely fine as well. Now, in terms of helmets, again, we see a lot of diversity. We see, of course, officers using very special and elaborate helmets, which are absolutely fine, although I'll have to go back to the centurion, the centurio Metellus, because I'm not really happy with his helmet, and I'm not really happy actually with the helmet worn by Arminius himself, but we'll get to that in a minute. But generally speaking, we see that soldiers have got helmets made again of copper alloy, like this one, which is made of brass. We see soldiers wearing Imperial Gallic type H and type F. We see Imperial Italic as well, again, some made of iron, some made of brass, and that's absolutely fine. I actually really like the choice of the helmet worn by the aquilifer, so the person who is carrying the eagle right next to the centurion at the beginning of the show. I love the fact that the helmet he is wearing actually looks like bronze. Being an aquilifer means that you've got a very important role, and these people were getting a lot more pay than regular soldiers, so it does make sense that he could afford a helmet which would be more fancy. Also, he's wearing an animal fur, which is fine. In this case, we see they chose a tiger. That's fine actually, because if you think about it now in our day and age, when we think of tigers, we think of India, and so you think about, what did the Romans go to India? But the thing is that there were tigers, for example, in Turkey and other places around the Mediterranean. They did go extinct, so that they're not there anymore, but they were at the time, and we do know that tigers were brought into the empire together with other exotic animals for games, for example, to be shown in the arena, in the Colosseum. So yeah, absolutely, an aquilifer could have a tiger. It makes sense. So why do I have a problem with the helmets of some of the officers? Well, here's the thing. If you look at the centurion here, the helmet has one very positive thing, and two, I want to say negative things. So two things I don't like. The positive thing is that he has got a horizontal crest, which is absolutely fine because he's a centurion. So centurions were the ones using a crest horizontal, and it was placed differently so that they could be spot very easily on the battlefield, because of course a centurion is in charge of 80 men, and therefore you need to be able to know where your officer is to be able to sort of imitate him. Also, because remember the fact that, I mean, you're wearing armor, and armor is really noisy, and also weapons are noisy, clashing, people screaming, people dying. During a battle, you're not going to always be able to hear what your centurion is commanding, is ordering you to do, and therefore being able to spot him immediately and kind of mimic what he's doing was also important. It's probably one of the reasons why the crest was there, and it was placed again differently from other crests that sometimes Romans used, particularly during parades, like the vertical one. Not in battle, in fact it's not shown here, which is great. And the crest is made of feathers. That's again great. Sometimes there are some reenactorisms that represent it differently. They don't use feathers. So the one problem I have with the officer is the fact that the helmet is very rough in its finish. Now this is an officer, and by the way, I understand this is a very important officer. He's not just a centurion, maybe he's a primus pilus, but even if he's not, he still is an officer, so he has more money. And when he speaks to Arminius, he does tell him that he was before in Pannonia, I believe, so this is a veteran. He probably has money, so it makes absolutely zero sense that his helmet is not polished, possibly to a shine actually, because that's what we know that the Romans did, and generally speaking they did it for everyone. So everyone should have a polished, well finished armor. How do we know? Well, first of all, a well polished armor is less prone to rust. If you just let it go, it will rust, it will be eventually unserviceable, and we know that for the Romans it was very important that your equipment was in pristine conditions at all times. The Roman writer Vegetius tells us, "Who can believe in a warlike nature of a soldier whose equipment is neglected and marred with rust?" Again, there is another writer from the 1st century AD, so perfect for this setting, Onasander, who tells us, "A general should make it a point to draw up his battle line resplendent in armour, as easy matter, requiring the men to be ordered to sharpen swords and polish helmets and body armour, for the advancing units appear more dangerous by the gleam of weapons, and the terrible sight brings fear and confusion to the hearts of the enemy." And this is just to give you a couple, because I don't want to go too deep, but even if we think about the accounts of Marcus Antonius, whose ambush was actually discovered by the enemy because the armor was shining, and so they could see them through the bushes. There are a lot of accounts that help us understand that yes, Roman helmets and armor would have been very well polished, and even more so an officer. So it kind of looks strange that it looks like unpolished and unfinished iron. So that's the first thing, and that's the same thing I can say for Arminius' faceplate of the helmet, which looks really cool. Let me get this straight. I love it. It looks really badass, and yes, they were used particularly by cavalry, and we know he was an officer of a auxiliary cavalry unit, but still, why isn't it polished? It should be. But apart from this, fantastic job on the armor and weapons. They look splendid. Probably the worst mistake in the TV series is the fact that we see stirrups, and we see them in the very first episode almost immediately when we see the Roman soldiers arriving at the village requiring tributes, and we see that they all have stirrups, and we see them very well in several shots. Now here's the thing, stirrups were not used by the Romans. Stirrups were not a thing in the classical world in Europe. Something similar to the stirrups were used in India, and we do have a coin, a silver denarus, which had the face of General or Legatus Quintus Labienus, which does show a saddle, and it does show something coming out of a saddle which kind of looks like a stirrup. Does that mean that the Romans used stirrups? No, but we could explain that during his campaigns in Syria, fought together with the Parthians, who were a cavalry people. But then again, Europeans will not use stirrups until the 8th century, in England even the 10th century, so that's completely misplaced. We're talking about like a 8th century gap. I understand that they probably used it because it made it easier for the actors to get on horse, but they should have removed them during the actual scenes, also because we don't have that many. We don't see all these cavalry charges during the movie, and stationary scenes definitely did not need the stirrups, so that's a big no-no. Now, what about the sort of clothing used by both the barbarians and the Romans? Okay, so the Romans are represented exceptionally well, so I'm not even going to dwell on that too much, but the tunics look really good. They look exactly, you can see that the production here has worked in with the costume designers, constantly looking at archaeological evidence and artistic representations of the time. And I have to say that I'm very happy with the barbarians too, because this Germanic population, the Germanic barbarians are represented wearing colorful tunics. We see blues, greens, oranges, reds, bright reds, and that's perfect. Finally, we don't see barbarians all covered up in mud and looking miserable with horrible grey or black leather jerkins. No, these are very well represented. You have the occasional fur, which is absolutely fine. As long as they don't overdo it, that's good. So I'm happy with how they are represented in their everyday life. And I'm also very happy with the hairstyle of the women and the men, which look elaborate. And they represent, again, the sort of iconography that we have about the Germanic tribes of this time. So we don't see people with unkempt hair because they're barbarians. No, we see people that took care of their looks and again, according to archaeological evidence, so that's fantastic. What was a little strange to see was an appearance of Skyrim's, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim's Forsworns from Markarth. Honestly, what the heck is that? I mean, I noticed people were complaining about the body paints used by the barbarians in combat, but actually, no, that's not a problem. We do have Latin writers telling us specifically about the army of ghosts, so to speak, telling us exactly about, for example, the Hari, a specific population, Germanic populations that used to fight against the Romans, and we know that they were considered to be very fearsome, outstanding enemies because of the fact that they used body paints. Now, we don't know exactly what that means. We don't know that if they were using reds or if they were using blues or if they were using blacks. We don't know, but we do know that they did use that. They did cover their bodies in paint, so that's fine. Maybe they kind of exaggerated a little bit, but still it's okay that they look like that. But the sort of idea of wearing skulls, animal skulls as headgear, that looks exactly like Skyrim's Forsworn. So if they are big fans of Markarth, which I am, I've got even the little building, I bought it, I did all the quests in there, so yeah. Now the representation of Germanic priests and priestesses, actually the female links between the gods and the population, it is backed up by history, but they look like fantasy shamans, all dressed up in black and black painting. They should have been represented wearing white, possibly a mantle, maybe a bronze belt. And I have to say, I did not know this, so I have to say big thanks to another YouTuber. In this case, his channel is called Europa Antiqua, very good channel. It's in Italian, so for those of you who understand Italian, go check him out. I'll leave a link in the description below. He did say a couple of things I hadn't noticed and I did not know, but because I watched his video, I noticed, I can now tell you, and so big thanks to him. This is not my finding. The other things I did know, but this one I didn't notice. Credo che ti chiami Joyel, ottimo lavoro, continua così, bellissimi video. Okay, so what about the battle, the most important moment in the TV series? Should I say spoiler alert? I mean, this is history. I suppose spoiler alert for those who didn't go to school. Okay, so the battle is represented in a very short, fashioned way. I mean, by looking at it, it really looks like it just lasted, what? Maybe a couple of hours tops. That's absolutely not the case. We do have accounts telling us about the Battle of Teutoburg, and we do know that it lasted most likely 3 full days. It does not look like that at all. And also they used specific techniques against the Romans. For example, they fell down trees with full on the Roman column, which is elongated, and therefore cutting it into pieces that then are very easy to manage for the attacking barbarians. But that never happened. Not in this battle, at least. It will happen on a later battle, but not in this one. And also the idea that they have escogitated of creating that fire trap, pure fantasy. So far, fantastic show. I really liked it and I really suggest you to check it out. I love many things. For example, the Latin used by the Romans, it's incredible, but I will make a dedicated video. And if you do like these kind of videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon, because I'm going to lose all the monetization. I'm not going to make any money from these reviews, unfortunately, because of the way the YouTube system works. All the money will go to them, the actual owners of the copyright of the TV series on Netflix. So if you can chip in with a little support on Patreon, I would appreciate. And and then I will soon make the video dedicated to the Latin. You know, I'm very much into linguistics. So the battle does have some cringy moments. Quite a few times we see again the situation whereby you have a warrior penetrating Roman armor as if it was butter. Now, you know that I've been fighting this for as long as my channel exists. The idea of why would you even bother to wear so much armor if it didn't work? So I have no problems with those shots where we see that the opponent, the barbarians, are bypassing Roman armor, you know, cutting the throat of the Roman. I'm alright with that, but I hate it when they just take a weapon and go through the armor, piercing it so easily just with the strength of your arm. And some of the shots, you can even see they're not even putting that much strength into the attack. Arminius' wife, who is fighting, she pierces a Roman soldier with a spear without any problems, and again, she surely wouldn't have had the strength to penetrate Roman armor. Now, I wouldn't have a problem with armor failing. Like, for example, if a Roman soldier falls or is pushed against a rock, and, you know, by someone really strong, and then for whatever reason a part of the armor detaches. For example, all the hinges in this lorica segmentata are copper alloy, so of course they are softer, whereas the plates in my reproduction, they're mild steel, but back in the day they would have been either very low carbon steel or just iron, perhaps even sandwiched plates sometimes. So a hinge breaks, an opening appears, and then you exploit that to thrust the guy behind the armor. That's absolutely fine. But I hate seeing armor being penetrated, and we see it all, and we also see mail being cut. Please don't do this. They do it all the time. It destroys the immersion. You are never going to cut through iron links. That's why armor was there, and that's why, one of the many reasons why fighting the Romans was extremely difficult. They were disciplined, they knew what they were doing, but also they had very excellent armor. Having said all that, we know that at the end of the battle, of course, Varus, the legatus legionis, so the general, decides to kill himself. So he removes his armor and he falls on his sword, and that's accurate. As far as we know, that's how he died. He committed suicide at the end of the battle because he knew that he was not going to win. He probably knew that they were going to torture him because people really hated Varus. That is true. That's very well portrayed, represented, and so he decided to take his own life, maybe also because of shame. Of course, Arminius did betray him. He did betray his trust. So his trust was misplaced, and therefore he kills himself. And then after he's dead, the father of Arminius' wives beheads him. But the thing is that in reality, as far as we know, it was Arminius who decapitated, beheaded Varus. So why did they change that? I think they changed it because it just wouldn't play along with the fiction, with the fantasy of Arminius and Varus being like a pater fili sort of relationship. The fact that he was adopted by Varus. But was he adopted by Varus? No, absolutely not. There is no reason to believe that Arminius, once reaching Rome, met Publius Quintilius Varus. Most likely the first time Arminius and Varus met was in fact on the front in Germania. Of course, I understand that they added all of that to create pathos, the idea of, the inner fight and battle of Arminius. What should I do? This is my father, now I'm a Roman. What do I do? Do I betray him? Yes, no. It creates a very moving story, but that one is fiction. Most likely Arminius hated Varus. That would make more sense. Also, another thing this YouTuber at Europa Antiqua channel underlined that I did not know is the fact that the Germanic wedding is completely fantasy. It's completely made up. This idea of the two spouses being wrapped around with the scene where we see the two spouses being wrapped around with this sort of veil, this sort of shroud that they are using, putting them very close to each other. That's completely made up. Again, I did not know that, but the moment I saw that scene, I thought to myself, that looks weird. Did they really do that? So he confirms, no, that's made up as well. Okay, so there are two more things that are very important, I think. One is the Romans are represented as evil. They're represented as tyrants, particularly Varus. reducing the population to absolute poverty, and also the Latin they use, which is amazing. I'd like to underline that the Latin used in this TV series is spectacular. But I will make two dedicated videos, one called Were the Romans Evil, and the other one specifically based on the Latin used in this episode, but I need to make a separate video. I will translate entire scenes and I'll tell you what I think the translation actually is, because sometimes the translators that translate for the Germanic people don't exactly do it. So I think it will be cool to look at every single word and how it's pronounced and why it's pronounced that way and how it was reconstructed and how we know how the Romans actually spoke, because of course they're not using ecclesiastical Latin, they're using classical pronunciation, and therefore I think it will be very interesting to see how accurate it is and how linguists reconstructed it. And if you like that, again, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I thank you very much for watching, and this is my first video on the Netflix series Barbarians. Excellent job, just a couple of things that might have been done differently, but all in all I'm very happy with the show. It's excellent, they've done a wonderful job, and I really suggest it to you noble ones. Check it out, you'll really like it. Alright noble ones, well, if you enjoyed this video, please remember thumbs up, and if you're not yet members of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. Yes, this is a Montefortino helmet. Yes, usually they were more common during the Republic and I am wearing an imperial kind of armor, but actually some soldiers did keep using these and they weren't just completely thrown away like you would imagine by looking at Hollywood movies and video games. Perhaps I could make a dedicated video to the Montefortino helmet too, and the development and evolution of helmets during the Roman era. Let me know if you like that idea in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.